Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
It's profoundly disturbing if you read it and think about it. The way the president speaks in such grandiose terms about himself suggests a level of delusion. I saved coal. I was treated better than anyone in the history of China. I did things Ronald Reagan couldn't do. The news media is going to have to keep me president because the entire media system would fall apart without me. This suggests a level of mental functioning which is not particularly acute. And when he starts talking about the Russia investigation, and he says 16 times, there's been no collusion, absolutely no collusion, everyone agrees there's no collusion, at some point you're just kind of babbling. And this is the President of the United States, and it cannot be reassuring to even people who support his policies to hear him speak in this way.
Is this in format, John, not in substance, but in format, is this a sort of end-of-year coda to the remarks he made to, as many business leaders and people across the spectrum said, to his great shame about Charlottesville, in that these were both times where his staff and his team and the professionals around him, from General John Kelly on down to his family, did not want, did not plan, did not orchestrate for him to do this. And he just breaks out of all rules and convention against any strategy to speak, to do what he feels he must do, and in doing so, offer some revelations about, as you put it, his state of mind, but also a total lack of protecting his own self-interest.
Precisely. He doesn't seem to be aware of what he is revealing in these interviews. And anyone who speaks about himself in the kind of terms that he does, absolute right to control the Justice Department, I know more than the greatest CPA, these are statements that are obviously cartoonishly ridiculous. And the fact that the president would feel free to say them to the New York Times suggests that he is not perceiving his own best interests or the interests of the White House.
David, no offense to CPAs, it's not even a brag I'm that familiar with. That people who've ascended to high office or being president would feel the need to go there. It seems that in the China remarks, in being the center of the media capitalist universe, in the CPA remarks, in his claim that he has a better mastery of healthcare than most presidents, when he's publicly said no one knew healthcare would be this complex, there seems to be something deeper going on. I mean, any individual claim sounds silly when you quote it, but what's the over-organizing principle here?
Well, Donald lives in this world where he creates his own reality, and if he says it, that means it's true. And he's delusional. John is exactly right about this. Donald is delusional. And I know, I've been attacked by all sorts of people for saying this, but he is delusional. And you're seeing his, this manifestation of his belief. Donald, remember, believes, and he's actually said at times, that he's superior to the rest of us, that of course he should be president. And you're seeing in this interview ridiculous, and John had the right phrase, cartoonish statements about himself. The interview also shows, by the way, that he's scared. The comments, as I read them, knowing Donald for now almost 30 years, his comments about Mueller and the implication that if I don't think he's fair to me, I will get rid of Mueller one way or another, go to the heart of this notion that he has power unto himself.
He doesn't ever say he'll get rid of him. He simply says more broadly, vaguely, that he can do anything with DOJ.
That's right, and that's a clear implication of what he's thinking about doing here. And if he's threatened and put in a box, he'll do whatever he thinks he needs to do.
It is Friday, December 29th of 2017, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. We've been working hard in the kitchen, preparing for, well, an end of the week, and as it turns out, an end of the year experience for you, who have come here on Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. That's right, folks, you have lucked out. You are a nighthawk in the diner of life, and welcome. Well, John Harwood and David K. Johnston took on Trump's delusional New York Times interview. Quite an interview. Curious about its origination. Newsmax? I'm always curious about Newsmax. That Newsmax guy being right there at Mar-a-Lago all the time. They make enough money to pay the initiation fee, and those fees went up. So when you're buying access, yeah, I guess you gotta have the funds. You know, you gotta spend some money to make whatever it is that you're trying to make. Regardless, I would think that there would be a cap on what the President of the United States can do, and I'm not just talking about unsupervised interviews, you know, at his private golf course. I'm talking about he can't just do anything he wants to do with the Justice Department. Come on, because as far as I know, I still hold the rights to the Justice Department. Now he has a Department of Justice, and as far as I'm concerned, he can do whatever he wants with that. No, he can't even do anything what he wants with that. He is restrained by, well, I think they're called constitutional restraints. This is the most impossibly bizarre gaslighting that we're being put through. I don't know. There's only so much one can say. Oh, but what I should say is that this is, of course, as you know, the last show of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy for the year. And I think I may have a show for Monday, and I may just put something together, and we'll still have a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but I may just do a mashup because it is New Year's Day, and I'll be up late, and I don't know. We'll see, but do tune in because we'll have a show one way or the other because the restaurant is always open during the week. It just has to be. All right. Okay, so if you, whatever device that you're on, if you would go to netrootsradio.com and scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll notice the chat room link and do chat with us. Roaring Girl does monitor that quite frequently during the day. And to the leftish are the contribute donate buttons, and that's how we pay our bills, of course, and we really do appreciate your generosity in that. And if you would like to contact me, you can, or engage with me, you can on Twitter. I'm at Justice Putnam, and also at Daily Coz as Justice Putnam. And yes, indeed, is my real name. Okay, so these are the issues that we will be attending to today and serving up for your news consumption pleasure. I guess it's pleasurable. It's informative. Indeed it is. Well, I hate ending the year on such down notes, but I tried to curate a menu today that could be uplifting, and maybe it can be. Maybe it will inspire. So it's in the 8 immortal flavors in Asian cooking, there is one prominent one, and that is the bitter flavor. So we end a little bitter, and then we'll have more sweetness ahead. Sounds like a rationalization to me, and it is. Okay, today we'll analyze how Bitcoin is financing America's extremist right-wing and neo-Nazi groups. They don't call it cryptocurrency for nothing. Trump fired the remaining members of the Presidential Advisory Council on HIV/AIDS with a letter delivered by FedEx. I guess he doesn't like Big Brown. And mirroring national trends, New York City crime rates plunged to record lows in spite of the Trump administration's claims of a deadly national crime wave. MS-13 is coming to chop off the heads of you and your family and everybody they know. Oh, that was in this reporter's satirical opinion. After the break, of course, we move to the chef's table, and today we'll have a little analysis of a former prosecutor's belief that the new direction of the Mueller probe could spell big trouble for Mark Zuckerberg. And Donald Trump is forging an America that is as greedy, deceitful, and cruel as he is. Yeah. Well, in spite of that down note, it is actually summed up in a much more positive and uplifting way. So stay tuned. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. All right, now that we're settled in here in the front cafe, this first dish on the menu that we have curated for you is by Nicole Carlos out of Ceylon. Political movements typically rely on public and private donations, but a new report in the Washington Post suggests that Bitcoin, the hot cryptocurrency so much in the news lately, is enabling right-wing and neo-Nazi extremist groups. According to the report, the Southern Poverty Law Center is tracking an estimated 200 Bitcoin wallets owned by right-wing extremists. Researchers in the report say they've specifically seen an increase in people on the far right moving their assets into the digital currency and using it, quote, for ordinary business purposes, end quote. Bitcoin is allowing people in the movement to go beyond cash in an envelope or a check, Heidi Byrick, head of the intelligence project at the SPLC, told the Post. It is really a godsend to them. According to SPLC research, 14.88 bitcoins were paid to Andrew Anglin, editor of the Daily Stormer, a notorious neo-Nazi online publication. The transaction was made on August 20th, according to the report, when Anglin was scrambling to recover from his publication, having been evicted from multiple web hosting services. Now, you know, of course, in neo-Nazi parlance, the number 14.88 is a reference to a Nazi slogan that is 14 words long, and they also use the number 88 as a code for Heil Hitler, H being the 8th letter of the alphabet. Now, that amount of bitcoins was reportedly worth around $60,000 at the time. $60,000 for the Daily Stormer. Wow. The payment was made by an anonymous source, according to cybersecurity researcher John Banbenek, who tracks Bitcoin transactions. I like that. The consonants in that. The John Banbenek who tracks Bitcoin transactions. Of course, Anglin, in a phone interview, confirmed to the Post that he does use Bitcoin almost exclusively. Bitcoin has helped out a lot, he said. And I'm sure he clicked his heels while he was doing it. $60,000 in Bitcoin this guy has. Well, okay. Cryptocurrency. There's something about that term. It just seems like it's populated by blood-sucking vampires. I might be right. All right, next course coming up here in the front cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Callum Patton out of Newsweek. Now, Donald Trump, on a few interviews on Howard Stern, maintained that he considered, not getting sexually communicable diseases as his own personal Vietnam. And so I figure, this recent action by Trump is just the continuing war on communicable diseases. And the guy is contrarian. And the black guy advocated this council, and obviously that has to go. Okay, well, Trump fired the remaining members of the Presidential Advisory Council on HIV/AIDS on Wednesday, reportedly informing them without explanation with a letter delivered by FedEx. Which is curious, because this morning he went tweeted madly that the post office should be charging Amazon so much more money to deliver their packages, and then he doesn't even use the post office. He uses FedEx. Big Brown, I got to tell you, they do deliver packages and letters too. Now, I will say you can get a letter through FedEx and UPS if you put it in a package. Who's going to know? Okay, the mass dismissal of the advisors marked another nadir in the administration's dealing with the council. In June, 6 members resigned from the council, writing in an open letter published in Newsweek saying the Trump White House was pushing for legislation that would harm people living with HIV. And I remember reporting at the time that was a feature, not a bug. That's exactly what they're trying to do. Scott A. Schultz, a Chicago-based HIV/AIDS activist and one of the members of the advisory panel who resigned over the summer, tweeted yesterday that the remaining council members have been fired for calling Trump and Mike Pence dangerous. Well, I think that language just proves their disloyalty to Herr Führer. Wouldn't you? That must not stand. Remaining HIV/AIDS council members booted by real Donald Trump. No respect for their service, Schultz wrote on the social media site. Dangerous that Trump and company, Pence especially, are eliminating few remaining people willing to push back against harmful policies like abstinence-only sex ed, he added. Well, if this council is arguing against abstinence-only sex ed, that's an out-and-out disloyal action to not only Herr Führer, but, his little religious toady, Mike Pence. Mike Pence went to Mother, and she said, "Ew, that's icky. Tell them to quit." Sources with knowledge of the terminations said that council members had been fired despite having more time on their appointments. Gabriel Maldonado, CEO of the LGBT and HIV/AIDS group True Evolution and a remaining member on the advisory council, said the reasons for the firings remain unclear, but may have been born of a desire by Trump administration to clear out appointments made by his predecessor, the black man from Kenya, the one without an adequate birth certificate. The guy that destroyed America for the worse, and we've got to turn it into, a right-wing fascist oligarchy. Barack Obama. I can only speculate, Maldonado said. Like any administration, they want their own people there. Many of us were Obama appointees. I was an Obama appointee, and my term was continuing until 2018. The decision by an administrator to clear house is not unprecedented. The Obama administration eliminated all of George W. Bush's appointees in the same way. Actually, he went there. He didn't do it by FedEx letter, though. Okay, come on. Wow. Okay. However, HIV/AIDS activists have been deeply critical of the White House's approach over the past year. In the 2018 fiscal year budget, Trump has sought huge cuts to programs, including $150 million on HIV/AIDS at the Centers of Disease Control. The administration also sought more than $1 billion in cuts from global programs like the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. Well, don't people understand? That money had to go into tax cuts. Do you know how many, $175 hamburgers, how many you can get with $150 million? Not very many when you think about it. Just under a year into his first term, Trump is also yet to appoint an HIV/AIDS chief. The first time since Bill Clinton created the position in 1993 that a president has failed to do so. When you are deconstructing the administrative state, these superfluous things, these departments, HIV/AIDS chief, that's just icky on his face. Get it away from me. And, ask Pence's wife. Mother says, icky. You better get it away from her and everybody. You don't want to track that with your shoes into the front foyer. All right, last dish coming out of the kitchen for the front cafe before we move everything back to the chef's table is by Yvette Cabrera out of Think Progress. Now there's been quite a bit of data of national decrease in crime trends. And there's data now that is absolutely contradicting Jeff Sessions' claim of a violent crime wave sweeping the nation. Imagine that. Crime in New York City has plunged to record lows not seen since the 1950s, even as police have made fewer arrests, used less deadly force, and scaled back controversial practices such as stop and frisk on the streets of the city, according to a report from the New York Times. Crime is down across the board for major felony crimes, including murder, manslaughter, rape, assault, and robbery, with killings at an all-time low since reliable records have been kept. As of Wednesday, there were 286 murders in the city compared to 2,245 in 1990. There is no denying that the arc is truly exceptional in the unbroken streak of declining crime, former police commissioner William J. Bratton told the New York Times. Now, Attorney General Jeff Sessions has repeatedly claimed that a violent crime wave is sweeping the nation and has also called for a return to law and order. We have a crime problem. I wish that the rise that we're seeing in crime in America today was some sort of aberration or blip. My best judgment, having been involved in criminal law enforcement for many years, is that this is a dangerous, permanent trend that places the health and safety of the American people at risk. Okay, sue me. So that wasn't so much like Jeff Sessions, but you get my drift. Now, of course, data tells a much different story because what does evidence have to do with what Jeff Sessions claims having been involved in criminal law enforcement for many years? Mm-hmm. Nationally, crime has remained near historic lows, even with local isolated increases, according to the Brennan Center for Justice. They called the Trump administration's proposed tough-on-crime rhetoric and proposals as solutions in search of a problem. Once again, a feature, not a bug, when you're deconstructing the administrative state. That is exactly one of the strategies that you impose. Earlier this year, the Brennan Center released an analysis of 2017 crime in America's 30 largest cities and found that crime overall was projected to decrease slightly by 1.8%. If the center's estimate holds, 2017 will have the second lowest crime rate since 1990. The Brennan Center also projected that the violent crime rate would decrease, albeit slightly, by about 0.6%, and attributed the decrease primarily to a stabilization of crime in Chicago and a decline of crime in Washington, D.C. These two cities experienced increases in violent crime in recent years, according to the center. The murder rate is also projected to decline this year, 2.5% lower than 2016, with the decline primarily driven by decreases in New York City, Detroit, and Houston, according to the Brennan Center. In New York City, crime data showed an uptick toward the end of 2017 in one area, reports of rapes. The increase, noted the New York Times, coincided with the Me Too movement and the publication of accusations of sexual assault and misconduct against Hollywood power players like Harvey Weinstein and many others across society, including media, politics, and sports figures. Police officials said news coverage of this issue may have played a role in the increase and also credited their work in encouraging domestic violence victims to speak out, meaning that the reports of crime of rapes have increased because the incidences of rapes have been, shall we say, fairly high. The 2015 Brennan Center study of crime trends found that over-harsh criminal justice policies, particularly increased incarceration, were not the main drivers of the crime decline. More important were various social, economic, and environmental factors, such as growth in income and an aging population. I might also say that the eradication of lead might have had something to do with it, and we would see that over time, decades. And so it was curious to me in how cavalier lead was allowed to be, put back essentially into water systems, et cetera, et cetera. Next thing you know, and I hate giving the guy the idea, Trump's going to reverse the lead control laws about paint. Oh yeah, let him have lead in the paint. Didn't hurt me, Trump says. Yeah, right. Okay, the introduction of CompStat, a data-driven policing technique, also played a significant role in reducing crime in cities that introduced it. The study recommended programs that improve economic opportunities, modernizing police practices, and expand treatment and rehabilitation programs as a better investment of public safety dollars. Autocrats are not concerned with that. They're not concerned about rehabilitation. They want compliance, and they're going to get it. All right, that brings us to our point where we're going to take our break, of course, and we'll move everything back to the chef's table and continue the conversation there. So you are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Let's talk about two daily essentials, breakfast and, of course, beer. Mass marketers of breakfast cereals have been in a downward sales spiral for about a decade, so they're pitching their products as health food, hoping to woo millennials who want cereals with natural ingredients and no artificial additives. Some brands are seeking good-for-you credibility by buying out organic brands, such as Kashi, consumed by Kellogg's. But the shift of this $10 billion market to healthier alternatives is, in fact, an enormous grassroots victory, driven by the organic movement, public interest groups, fearless nutritionists, and especially by countless moms, dads, and kids who simply refused to swallow the industry's crap. Now, beer. Last year, Anheuser-Busch InBev mounted a multi-million-dollar coup on America. Not on our country, but on its name. For 6 months, the beer behemoth expropriated our nation's name for a tacky advertising campaign, rebranding its Budweiser product America. But the PR ploy backfired when a flurry of stinging media stories pointed out that Bud is owned by a Brazilian consortium based in Belgium. Undeterred by facts, Big Bud announced that it has invested beaucoup bucks here to improve its beer quality. Mostly, though, that enhancement has come from buying out 10 local craft breweries. AB InBev grabbed these independent brew makers because they represent the real beer of today's America, rapidly taking customers away from the giant purveyor of bland suds. This is Jim Hightower saying, last year, the sales of Bud were down by 1/3 from its peak sales year. Meanwhile, craft breweries are gaining market share. Production of their good beer was up 12% last year to 24 million barrels.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Gaines. Too many people are overindulging in alcohol and putting themselves at risk for death from alcohol poisoning. Dr. Daphna Kani is an epidemiologist with CDC's alcohol program in the National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. She's joining us today to discuss the dangers of binge drinking, including alcohol poisoning death. Welcome to the show, Daphna.
Thank you for having me.
Daphna, let's start with what is binge drinking?
Binge drinking is a dangerous pattern of alcohol consumption that is defined as 4 or more drinks for women on an occasion, 5 or more drinks for men on an occasion, usually in a short period of time. Binge drinking is the most common and most deadly pattern of excessive alcohol use, and most binge drinkers are not alcohol dependent. Binge drinking has many risks, and one of which is death from alcohol poisoning.
How common are deaths from alcohol poisoning in the U.S.?
More than 2,200 people die from alcohol poisoning each year in the United States, which translates to an average of 6 deaths each day.
Who is most at risk for death from alcohol poisoning?
3 in 4 alcohol poisoning deaths involve adults ages 35 to 64, and most of the deaths are among men. Non-Hispanic whites has the most number of deaths from alcohol poisoning, though alcohol poisoning death rates are highest among American Indians and Alaska Natives. About 70% of the deaths were among those who were not alcohol dependent.
Daphna, what are the signs of life-threatening alcohol poisoning?
When drinking a large amount of alcohol in a short period of time, it can result in very high levels of alcohol in the body, which can shut down critical areas of the brain that control breathing, heart rate, and body temperature. The life-threatening signs and symptoms of alcohol poisoning include an inability to wake up, vomiting, seizures, slow or irregular breathing, and low body temperature. What are some ways to prevent deaths from alcohol poisoning? First and foremost, don't binge drink. If you choose to drink, do so in moderation, up to 1 drink a day for women, up to 2 drinks a day for men. And get help for anyone experiencing life-threatening signs of alcohol poisoning. The key to prevent alcohol poisoning death is to prevent binge drinking.
Where can listeners get more information about binge drinking and alcohol poisoning?
You can find more information at cdc.gov/alcohol.
Thanks, Daphne. I've been talking today with CDC's Dr. Daphne Knie about the dangers of binge drinking and alcohol poisoning. Remember, more than 2,200 Americans die each year from alcohol poisoning. Life-threatening signs of alcohol poisoning include vomiting, seizures, inability to wake up, slowed or irregular breathing or heart rate, and bluish skin tone. For anyone exhibiting these signs, call 911 or get the person to a healthcare facility immediately. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Robert Gaines for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The Constitution clearly gave the U.S. Supreme Court the power to overrule state laws that violate the Constitution or the laws made by Congress. The power is based on the Supremacy Clause in Article 6, Section 2. This makes the Constitution and all laws and treaties approved by Congress in exercising its enumerated powers the supreme law of the land. It also says that judges in state courts must follow the Constitution or federal laws and treaties if there is a conflict with state laws. The national government is supreme in those areas where the Constitution gives it the power to act. For example, suppose a state passes a law allowing factories to pollute the air. Then Congress passes a law controlling the pollution a factory can produce. The national government's laws would have to be obeyed over state laws. That's all for today's podcast. The show's theme song is Complacent by Cheryl B. Engelhardt. You can find Cheryl online at cbemusic.com. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute. Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The Constitution clearly gave the U.S. Supreme Court the power to overrule state laws that violate the Constitution or the laws made by Congress. The power is based on the Supremacy Clause in Article 6, Section 2. This makes the Constitution and all laws and treaties approved by Congress in exercising its enumerated powers the supreme law of the land. It also says that judges in state courts must follow the Constitution or federal laws and treaties if there is a conflict with state laws. The national government is supreme in those areas where the Constitution gives it the power to act. For example, suppose a state passes a law allowing factories to pollute the air. Then Congress passes a law controlling the pollution a factory can produce. The national government's laws would have to be obeyed over state laws. That's all for today's podcast. The show's theme song is Complacent by Cheryl B. Engelhardt. You can find Cheryl online at cbemusic.com. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
This is Scientific American's 60 Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Light doesn't travel well underwater, so dolphins and other toothed whales navigate like bats, using echolocating clicks.
They're like lasers of sound that they produce out of their forehead, and they bounce them off of things the same way bats do to interpret their environment.
Kate Fraser is an oceanographer at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and her studies of underwater clicks include tossing computers, worth about $100,000 each, over the side of a ship into the Gulf of Mexico.
It just feels so wrong, and then, a year later you go back, you send out this little ping signal, it goes doot, 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 and that goes out to the instrument, and it drops its weights and just floats to the surface, and it's like this magical moment, like, oh my gosh, I never thought we'd get that back.
The waterproof computers have underwater microphones attached, so when they float back up, they're loaded with a symphony of underwater sounds, including more than 50 million clicks. And by the way, that sample was slowed down by half and lowered an octave. Fraser used to comb through that audio herself, staring at the signals and trying to differentiate one from the other.
More than I would like to spend my time sifting through, yeah.
So she set machine learning algorithms at the data instead, which sifted out 7 distinct clicking patterns. And the algorithms were able to identify one species, called Risso's dolphin, by sound alone. The results are in the journal PLOS Computational Biology. Traditional marine mammal surveys scan surface waters from a boat, and they extrapolate from there. But this tech might offer an alternative.
Instead of going out on a boat, you put this instrument out and it does this passive acoustic listening for a year or, many years in a row. And then you can use that to get better time series of what's happening with these animals over a long period of time.
If it can figure out how to tease out more individual species types, this survey method might really click.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Thank you for accompanying us back to the chef's table. And we'll have some more curated dishes out of the kitchen coming up in just a moment. But we also always offer a little palate cleanser, and that is the weather from around the world. And we start off here along the banks of the Rogue River. In the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, it is currently 40 degrees. It's a little warm, huh? At least it feels warm compared to what we had. Partly cloudy, though we have a little bit of a drizzle currently. Winds are light and variable out of the, looks like the northeast, yes. And rain will increase throughout the day with showers tonight. We'll have a low of 44, that's all? No, I think we'll be going a little bit lower than that. Though we are slated to have a high of, where is it? 57. No, I think that's going to come down just a tad. All right, well, low pressure continues at 30.17 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles. Humidity is 96%. If it's drizzling, to me, that's 100%. But, I don't know, I'm a romantic. Okay, so, looks like tomorrow we will just have a 20% chance of rain, but that is subject to change because I live in Oregon. I live in a rainforest. Okay, so weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people live around the world. Okay, so right now, London is experiencing 46 degrees and clear. Paris is 45 with rain. They continue to have their wind advisory that could impact electrical infrastructure. Rome continues to have their wind advisory, which is the same, and they are 48 degrees and clear. Kiev is 45 with rain. Kabul, 49 degrees with haze. Hong Kong, 67 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 42 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 79 degrees and overcast. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and clear. And New York, New York is 16.3 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. It's chilly in New York. So that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations, and these people live around the world. All right, the first dish we have here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Travis Geddes out of Raw Story. Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team has begun questioning RNC staffers about their data operation, And a former federal prosecutor suggests that could put Facebook under new scrutiny. Investigators are asking RNC staffers about how the GOP coordinated with the Trump campaign to target voters in key swing states, and Renato Mariotti, a Democratic candidate for Illinois Attorney General and a former federal prosecutor, explained what that new direction might mean. This aspect of Mueller's investigation, he said, deserves more attention because it's the piece most likely to result in charges that resemble what people commonly call collusion. Russian and Americans working together to influence the election, Mariotti said. He said the special counsel had previously obtained a search warrant for Facebook records, which means Mueller had evidence that convinced a judge there was a good reason a crime occurred during the campaign. That crime would likely be a foreign contribution in connection with a U.S. election, which is a crime if it is done knowingly and willingly, Mariotti explained. It's also a crime for an American to knowingly aid in that effort. We're looking at you, Mark. Didn't they have actual representatives in the war room, the data war room, with not only the RNC, but the Trump campaign itself? Oh, I know. They say they supply that to all their clients. Sure. Senator Mark Warner, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, wants Facebook and the Trump campaign's inner circle to reveal more about their connections to Russia, which bought ads on the social network targeted to individual voters in swing states. Now, I will say there were, and we know there were active measures across all social media platforms. But Mark Zuckerberg has been specific and particular in his denials, and then makes business deals with dictatorships and gives them what they want, and then people die. Well, I don't know. Maybe making a buck is that important. Warner said last week, I would like to have higher confidence that Facebook really has done the investigation of all possible Russian connections, and some of the Russian sites were actually started or activated outside of Russia, but were still controlled by them. Mueller's team is now, Facebook says, we checked it all out. Mueller's team is now investigating whether any RNC staffers illegally coordinated with Russian efforts to sway the election toward Trump, Mariotti said, and that could spell trouble for Facebook and its chief executive, Mark Zuckerberg. We don't know yet what Mueller will find, but if he indicted an American for aiding a Russian effort to influence the election, that would be more explosive than the charges we've seen thus far. Yeah, especially someone, as rich as Zuckerberg, wouldn't it? I will say a crime is a crime is a crime is a crime. All right, finishing up here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy for our last service of 2017. It's been a pleasure serving you as we've launched our new show for on Netroots Radio here. It's been great forging ahead, and glad that you've stayed with us through all of these changes. Now, this last dish that we are serving up is by Jacob Sugarman out of Alternet. 11 months into his presidency, Donald Trump remains something of an enigma for a large subsection of the political press. Is he a white nationalist? Has his affiliation with Breitbart CEO Steve Bannon and his refusal to condemn the marchers in Charlottesville might suggest? Could he be a Western chauvinist who believes Islam poses an existential threat to America's survival? Or is he just a plutocrat with a potty mouth and a golden toilet? A nominally more vulgar version of Mitch McConnell and Senator Jeff Flake. What if he's all three at once? The recent passage of so-called tax reform, which could kick as many as 13 million people off their health insurance and extinguish the last embers of America's middle class, raises yet another possibility. He is none of these things. While the president is indisputably a bigot, a misogynist, and a predatory capitalist, one component of the GOP tax bill offers compelling evidence that his sole ideology is his own malignant narcissism, what David Roth at the Baffler calls the blank, sunking nullity of vanity and appetite. Well, we're way past nattering nabobs and nepotism now, aren't we? Trump has made no secret of his contempt for America's first black president, but the legacy he has worked hardest to dismantle might not be Barack Obama's, but that of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. As Heather Cox Richardson argues in The Guardian, the Trump administration has launched an all-out assault on the New Deal, not just the welfare state it helped establish, but the very idea that government can be used as a mechanism to improve people's material conditions. Ultimately, Trump's presidency represents the culmination of a right-wing movement that has been underway for nearly half a century. I would say more than half a century, because the actual fight against the New Deal began before the New Deal became the New Deal. Ronald Reagan, with his derision of the welfare queen and his mantra that government is not the solution to our problem, government is the problem, rode that racist anti-government cowboy image into the White House, Cox wrote. Trump is this conservative macho individualist exaggerated to caricature. He brags about he knows better than anyone how to run a successful business, how to fight office, how to find the best people for office. The Trump administration has rolled back dozens of protections for American workers, including an Obama-era rule that entitles servers to their tip money. But his crowning achievement is the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. In addition to repealing the individual mandate of the Affordable Care Act, which helps ensure the ACA remains solvent by requiring healthy Americans to obtain insurance, the GOP bill entrenches income inequality for at least a generation through the repeal of the estate tax. It creates permanent tax cuts for multinational corporations, while those for lower-income earners expire after several years, and the nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation predicts it will add $1 trillion to the national deficit. This might be easy enough to dismiss if the GOP weren't planning on using a manufactured budget crisis as a pretext to slash essential government programs like Medicare and Social Security, which was signed into law in 1965 as part of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. It would be giving Trump more credit than he deserves to suggest the president played an integral role in any part at all, for that matter, in drafting the legislation. As the Beltway media reminds us ad nauseum, it has been Paul Ryan's dream to gut Medicaid since he was throwing keggers in college, an education he was able to pay for in part with the Social Security benefits he received upon the death of his father. But one of the defining features of the Trump administration is that his very active government assumes the basic character of Trump himself, and the GOP tax bill is no exception. In addition to enriching the top 10th of 1% at the expense of the middle class, the legislation explicitly rewards taxpayers who file as private entities than wage earners. This invites Americans to game the federal government, but only those who can afford to hire an accountant with the expertise to do so. Cool, we're back into creative financing again. Trump launched his real estate career by extracting exorbitant sums of money from the state. The New York Times estimates that his deal for the Hyatt Regency alone has cost New York City as much as $350 million since the mid-'70s. Only the scale of his con has changed over the ensuing decades. He may not have authored the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, just as he had virtually no part in writing his best-selling business book, The Art of the Deal. But he has reshaped the country in his own image. Americans are not only encouraged, but financially incentivized to be as greedy, deceitful, and callous as the President of the United States. Trump's blank-sucking nullity has swallowed the whole of the country. Welcome to the void. And Happy New Year! Well, I would think that we can do better than that, can't we? Yes, we can. And we will. And we will. Because one of my resolutions is the same resolution I make every year. And that's to become even more involved and active in what it means to be a community. So with that, we will leave you until we see you on Monday for another year and another new year and another beginning of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on Netroots Radio, which I would suggest go ahead and stay tuned to Netroots Radio. We'll have some great content through the weekend, of course. There will be holiday special content continuing since it's still the holidays, and we'll mix in original content as it comes in, and our national feeds will be either on holiday or not, but we will have them as well, so stay tuned to that. So we will see you on Monday at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.